We've always been told that hell is just this massive, burning cave deep underground. But if you really sit back and think about it, how do you actually build a place that is supposed to hold billions of people for the rest of eternity? You don't just start digging. You need a plan. You need an architect. Before there was ever a single drop of fire or the sound of a scream, there was just nothing. A complete, terrifying void. And into that empty space, the architect was thrown. Now, imagine being a master builder, someone who lived to create, and suddenly you're standing in a place where there's no floor, no ceiling, and not even a single ray of light to see your own hands. Most would have just given up and let the darkness swallow them whole. But this being? He looked at that absolute nothingness and saw it as a challenge. He saw it as a blank page. He realized pretty quickly that he couldn't build this place out of bricks or wood. Those things rot. They break. Instead, he decided to build hell out of the only thing he had in abundance, the void itself. He started taking the silence and weaving it together tighter and tighter until it wasn't just quiet anymore. It was heavy. It was a weight that could crush your chest. He took the feeling of falling, that stomach-flipping drop you feel in a nightmare, and he turned that into the foundation. This is the part that really gets to me. He didn't just build a prison, he built a psychological trap. He used geometry that doesn't make sense to us. Imagine walking down a hallway that feels like it's 5 miles long, but when you turn around, the door you just came through is right behind your shoulder. He made rooms that fold into themselves, ensuring that no matter how fast you run or how far you go, you always end up exactly where you started. He didn't need locks or keys because he built the walls out of the things we carry with us. He used the weight of human regret as the mortar. He used our own secrets to reinforce the pillars. It's a masterpiece of cruelty, really. He created a space so perfectly designed for misery that the walls themselves seem to breathe with your own anxiety. So, when we talk about the blueprint of nothingness, we're talking about the moment the universe got a basement. A place where the light doesn't just stop, but where the light was never allowed to exist in the first place. The architect didn't just build a cage. He built a world that makes you forget that outside was ever an option. And the scariest part? He's never actually finished. Every time the world gets a little darker, he's down there drafting a new wing, just waiting for the next shipment of raw material to arrive. So, once the architect had his plan, he had to actually lay the first stone. But in a place with no ground, where do you start? This is where it gets truly trippy. He created what we call the geometry of despair. Think about the way your house is built. Everything is square, level, and makes sense. If you walk 10 steps forward and 10 steps back, you're right where you started. But the architect realized that if he wanted to break a soul, he had to break their sense of reality first. He didn't build with right angles. He built with angles that shouldn't exist. Imagine walking into a room that looks perfectly normal at first. But as you walk toward the far wall, you realize the wall isn't getting any closer. You start to run, your heart is pounding, but the floor is just stretching out beneath you like a rubber band. Or imagine climbing a spiral staircase for what feels like hours, only to look down and realize you're still only 3 inches off the ground. That is the geometry of despair. It's the feeling of wrongness made into a physical building. He designed the underworld so that the very shape of the rooms messes with your brain. He built gravity traps, where you might be walking on the floor 1 second, and the next, the room tilts and you're standing on the ceiling, looking down into a pit that wasn't there a moment ago. There is no up or down there. There is only where the architect wants you to be. It's like being trapped inside a giant, hateful puzzle box. You know how when you're lost in a bad dream and you keep opening doors only to find the same hallway over and over? That's not a glitch in the system. That was his first design choice. He wanted to make sure that even if a soul managed to get out of their cage, they would just get lost in the hallways forever. He understood that the worst kind of torture isn't physical pain, it's the realization that you can no longer trust your own eyes. He built a place where the walls move when you aren't looking, where the shadows are longer than the objects casting them, and where every corner you turn leads you deeper into a maze that has no exit. It's a geometry designed to make you feel small, confused, and utterly hopeless before the real punishment even begins. Think about the last time you felt a heavy heart. You know that feeling after you do something you're deeply ashamed of? That physical weight in your chest that makes it hard to breathe? Most people think that's just an emotion, just a chemical reaction in the brain. But the architect? He saw it as a physical resource. He realized that guilt is the heaviest substance in existence. He began to harvest what he called the weight. When a person on earth commits an act of true malice, When they betray someone who trusts them, or when they take something that doesn't belong to them, a tiny piece of their soul calcifies. It turns into a hard, black, dense stone. On the surface you can't see it, but in the realm of the architect, these sins started falling through the floor of reality like lead weights. Imagine the architect standing at the very bottom of the void, looking up. He's watching a literal rain of black, jagged rocks falling from the world above. These aren't rocks made of minerals, they are rocks made of human choices. He began to gather them. He didn't use a hammer and nails to put them together. He used a process called spiritual compression. He would take a pile of these stones, each one representing a different crime, and he would crush them together until they bled a thick, black oil. That oil is what we call the tar of despair. He used it as a mortar. If you were to walk up to one of the walls in hell today and press your ear against it, you wouldn't hear the wind. You would hear the faint, muffled whispers of the people whose actions built that very wall. You'd hear the "I'm sorry's" and the "I shouldn't have's" that were said too late. But he needed more than just stone. He needed iron for the gates and the chains. And for that he turned to anger. Pure, unrefined rage. He found that if you take the heat from a person's hatred and condense it down, it turns into a metal that is harder than diamond and colder than ice. This abyssal iron is what makes up the cages. It's a metal that doesn't just hold your body, it stings your soul every time you touch it, because it's made of the very emotion that landed you there in the first place. The most disturbing part of his gathering phase, though, was how he fueled the forge. He realized that a fire built with wood eventually goes out. But a fire built with denial? That burns forever. He gathered the lies people tell themselves to justify their bad behavior, and he used them as the coal for his furnace. So, when you picture the underworld, don't think of it as a natural cave. Think of it as a massive, recycled monument to everything humanity has done wrong. It is a city built out of our own baggage. The architect just happened to be the one who knew how to stack the weight so it would never, ever fall over. He is still out there, standing in the rain of falling stones, picking up the heavy ones, and wondering where he's going to fit your contribution into the next wall. Imagine taking a massive, heavy sheet of reality and just tearing a hole in the center. Then, around that hole, you tear another circle and another, until you have 9 distinct rings of jagged, broken space sinking deeper and deeper into the dark. The architect designed these rips to be specialized. He understood that the human mind is a complex thing, so the torture had to be complex too. He started at the top with the rip of limbo. This is the most devious one in my opinion. It's not a place of fire, it's a place of almost. It's an endless, gray waiting room where the lighting is just a little too dim and the air is just a little too thin. It's for the people who weren't bad, but they weren't good either. They just existed. Their punishment? They have to wait for an appointment that is never, ever going to happen. The architect built the walls here out of boredom and unfulfilled potential. As you go deeper, the rips get more aggressive. By the time you get to the middle rings, the ones for the violent and the angry, the architect changed his building style. He stopped using stone and started using sensory overload. He built the rip of wrath as a swamp made of hot, liquid hate. If you're in there, you're not just standing in mud. You're standing in the physical manifestation of every temper tantrum and every act of road rage that ever happened. The architect designed the air here to taste like copper and smoke, making your lungs burn with every breath. But the deeper he went, the colder his heart got. This is the big secret of the grand design. The hottest fires are at the top, but the true evil is at the bottom. When he reached the final 9th rip, the place for traitors, the architect ran out of fire. He realized that the ultimate sin isn't heat, it's the coldness of a heart that betrays a friend. So, he built the center of the underworld out of solid, absolute ice. He didn't use water to make this ice, he used the absence of love. It's a frozen lake so cold that it doesn't just freeze your skin, it freezes your thoughts. The architect's grand design ensures that as you descend, the weight of the layers above you gets heavier. If you're at the bottom, you aren't just in a cold room, you are literally carrying the weight of the 8 other rips on your shoulders. You are the foundation for the entire structure. He built it as a funnel. Everything, all the screams, all the heat, all the guilt, eventually drains down toward that center point. It's a masterpiece of engineering that turns human failure into a self-sustaining ecosystem. The architect doesn't need to guard the doors because the deeper you go, the more the design itself convinces you that you belong there. Once the architect had the walls up and the 9 rips carved out, he faced his biggest engineering hurdle. A structure this massive, one that defies gravity, warps time, and holds the weight of billions, needs a power source. You can't just flip a switch to keep the fires of the middle rings burning or the ice of the deep rings frozen. You need a battery. You need a heart. He called this the Engine of Agony. Think about the most stressful day of your life. That feeling where your heart is racing, your palms are sweaty, and your brain is screaming at you that something is wrong. That energy you feel? In our world, it's just stress. In the architect's world, it's electricity. He realized that human suffering isn't just a byproduct of punishment, it's a high-octane fuel. He didn't build a furnace that burns coal. He built a machine that grinds souls against the very fabric of reality. Imagine a colossal vertical shaft that runs through the exact center of all 9 levels. Inside this shaft are massive, jagged gears made of that abyssal iron we talked about. These gears aren't turned by steam or water. They are turned by the friction of resistance. See, every soul that enters the underworld spends their first 100 years trying to fight it. They scream, they claw at the walls, they beg for mercy, they try to run. The architect loves that. Every time a soul resists, they create a psychic friction. He designed the engine to catch that resistance and convert it into raw, humming power. The more you fight your fate, the brighter the fires in the upper levels burn. Your struggle is literally the electricity that keeps your neighbor's cage locked. But he went even deeper. He knew that eventually, after a few centuries, a soul might get tired. They might go numb and stop fighting. If that happened, the lights would go out. So he added a feedback loop. He built these massive rhythmic acoustic funnels all over the underworld. Their only job is to catch the sound of every sob, every moan, and every bone-chilling scream. He didn't just want the noise, he wanted the vibration. He took those sounds and piped them directly into the engine. The vibration of 1 billion people screaming in unison creates a low-frequency hum, a brown note of the soul that vibrates the very molecules of the underworld. This vibration keeps the stone walls hard and the iron chains strong. If the screaming ever stopped, the underworld would literally shake itself apart and dissolve back into the void. The architect doesn't just want you to suffer, he needs you to suffer. The Engine of Agony is the ultimate dark irony. The prison is powered by the people inside it. You aren't just a prisoner, you are a component. You are an AA battery in a machine that never sleeps. When you hear that faint, low humming sound in the back of your head during a quiet moment, that steady, rhythmic thumping that sounds like a distant factory, the architect wants you to know that the engine is running perfectly. It's warm, it's greased with the tar of despair, and it has plenty of room for a new power cell. Now we get to the politics of the pit. You see, most people think the devil is the CEO of hell, the guy who owns the place, runs the show, and sits on the throne. But in the architect's eyes, the prince is just a high-profile tenant. This is the hidden war, the rivalry between the architect and the prince. Think about it like this. If you move into a penthouse, you might own the furniture and the view, but you don't own the plumbing. You don't own the load-bearing walls. If the guy who built the skyscraper decides to walk away, your penthouse is just a box of glass falling through the sky. That is the leverage the architect holds over the king of lies. The prince, Lucifer, is all about the show. He wants the drama, the temptation, the grand spectacle of the fall. He views hell as his kingdom, his throne room where he can mock God. But the architect? He's a pragmatist. He doesn't care about sin in a religious way. He cares about structural integrity. To the architect, the devil is a chaotic, messy roommate who keeps trying to renovate the house without looking at the blueprints. There's this incredible tension between them. The prince wants to pack more souls in, to create more chaos, to make the fire hotter. But the architect knows the Engine of Agony has a limit. He's the one who has to go to the prince and say, if you add one more wing of prideful kings, the foundation of the third rip is going to buckle. Cool it. Can you imagine that? A being so powerful he can tell the devil to back off? The architect looks at the prince and sees an amateur. He sees someone who enjoys the screams too much to realize that the screams are actually a fuel source that needs to be managed. On the flip side, the prince hates the architect because the architect is the only thing in the universe he can't truly control. He can't fire him, and he certainly can't kill him, because the moment the architect's heart stops beating, the geometry of despair loses its logic and the whole underworld collapses into a pile of meaningless dust. They have these long, silent standoffs in the deep dark. The prince will demand a new, more elaborate torture chamber, something flashy and terrifying. And the architect will just stare at him with those cold, empty eyes and remind him that every new room requires a new weight of guilt to hold it up. He forces the devil to realize that he is just as much a prisoner of the architecture as the souls in the cages. The prince wears the crown, but the architect holds the keys to the engine room. And in the dark, when the screams die down for a split second, the prince is terrified of the day the architect decides he's finally finished with the project, and decides to take the blueprints home. Even a master builder makes mistakes. But when you're dealing with the architecture of the infinite, an error isn't just a crooked door or a leaky pipe. It's a tear in the fabric of existence. This is the forbidden wing, also known as the error. See, the architect spent eons calculating every inch of the underworld. He accounted for every sin, every law of physics, and every drop of human blood. But there's a secret he doesn't want the prince or anyone else to know. Somewhere in the deep, dark corners of the seventh rip, tucked away behind a wall that looks like solid obsidian, there is a section that wasn't supposed to be there. It started as a simple mathematical glitch. In the architect's blueprints, there was a coordinate where the geometry of despair didn't add up. It was a place where $1 plus $1 equaled nothing. Not the void he built on, but a different kind of nothing. A hole in the hole. At first he tried to build over it. He tried to seal it off with the thickest slabs of abyssal iron he could forge. But the error didn't care about his materials. The forbidden wing is a place where the architect's rules don't apply. Inside those walls, gravity doesn't just shift, it vanishes. Time doesn't just warp, it loops back on itself until the past and the future are screaming at each other in the same room. The horror of the forbidden wing isn't that it's scary, it's that it's uncontrolled. In the rest of the underworld, the torture has a purpose. It's a machine. But in the forbidden wing, things just happen. You might walk into a room and find yourself standing in a field of flowers that smell like rotting meat, under a sun that casts shadows upward. You might see versions of yourself that never existed, versions that were never born, all trapped in a state of permanent, glitching static. The architect is terrified of this place. Why? Because it's proof that he isn't God. It's a reminder that no matter how perfect his prison is, the universe is still weirder and more chaotic than he can understand. He's afraid that if the error spreads, the logic holding the rest of the underworld together will start to unravel. If the walls of the forbidden wing ever crumble, the geometry of despair will collapse, and the entire underworld will be swallowed by something far older and far more hungry than any demon. Even the prince won't go near it. He's heard the sounds coming from behind those sealed doors, sounds that aren't screams, but the sound of reality itself being torn like wet paper. The architect keeps it a secret because a builder is only as good as his work. And the forbidden wing is the one room he can't finish, he can't fix, and he can't destroy. It's the ghost in the machine. And sometimes, when the engine of agony hums just right, those sealed doors vibrate, and for a split second, the architect wonders if he's the one who built the prison, or if the prison is building something else inside of him. First, there is the obsidian compass. This isn't for finding north. In a place where north doesn't exist, you need a different kind of direction. This compass doesn't point to a pole. It points to the nearest source of pure suffering. The needle isn't made of metal. It's a sliver of a broken heart, suspended in a liquid made of human tears. When the architect is laying out a new hallway, he holds the compass out. If the needle spins wildly, the ground is too happy, too light. He can't build there. He has to wait until the compass locks onto a specific frequency of agony. Only then does he know the ground is heavy enough to support the weight of his walls. It's a tool that finds the exact spot where a soul is most likely to give up hope. Then he has the plumb line of souls. This is how he ensures his walls are straight. But straight in hell doesn't mean vertical. It means the wall is perfectly aligned with the descent of a falling soul. The weight at the bottom of the string isn't lead. It's a tiny, crystallized fragment of a first sin, the very first lie ever told. When he drops that line, it doesn't hang toward the ground. It pulls toward the center of the ninth rip, toward the cold heart of the abyss. If the wall he's building isn't perfectly aligned with that pull, the structure becomes unstable. And in hell, an unstable wall doesn't just fall over. It starts to leak light from the world above. The architect cannot have that. He uses the plumb line to make sure every brick of guilt is leaning exactly the right way to keep the darkness pressed in tight. Finally, and this is the one that really gets under my skin, he uses the ink of void. He doesn't use pencils or charcoal for his blueprints. He carries a small stone vial filled with a liquid that is so black it actually looks like a hole in reality. This ink is made from forgotten memories, all the things people forget right before they die. When he draws a line with this ink on his spectral blueprints, that line becomes a physical law. If he draws a door manifests. If he crosses a room out, that room, and everyone inside it, simply ceases to exist. It's the ultimate tool of unmaking. He isn't just building, he's writing the script for your eternity. If he decides your cell should have no windows, he doesn't remove the windows. He simply unwrites the concept of a window from the space you're standing in. He treats these tools with a terrifying level of respect. He cleans them with the breath of the dying and stores them in a box made of stolen time. He knows that if he ever lost the compass, he'd be as lost as the rest of us. If he broke the plumb line, the underworld would drift away from the abyss. He is a man of the craft. And as he walks the silent, echoing halls of the unfinished wings, you can hear the faint clink-clink of these tools hitting his belt. It's a rhythmic, mechanical sound that tells you one thing. The builder is on site, the measurements are being taken, and he's just about ready to start working on your floor. Think about the feeling you get when you walk into a brand new house. That smell of fresh paint, the perfectly clean floors, the sense that everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Now imagine that same feeling, but instead of a home, it's a cage. And instead of paint, you smell the cold, metallic scent of the abyssal iron and the thick, suffocating weight of the ink of void. When you finally cross the threshold, you won't see the prince on his throne or hear the roaring fires right away. The first thing you'll experience is silence. A deep, heavy silence that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. That's the architect's signature. He's standing there in the shadows of the entry hall, with his obsidian compass in one hand and his spectral blueprints in the other. He isn't there to judge your soul, that's someone else's job. He's there to check the fit. He's going to watch how you walk across the floor he built. He's looking to see if the geometry of despair is doing its job. Does the hallway feel too long to you? Good. Does the ceiling feel like it's slowly lowering as you breathe? Perfect. He's like a tailor, but instead of a suit, he's fitting you for a permanent residence. He wants to make sure that the room he's assigned to you resonates with your specific brand of guilt. If you were a person who lived your life looking over your shoulder, he's built you a room where the shadows always move just out of your line of sight. If you were someone who craved control, he's put you in a space where the floor tiles shift every time you take a step. This is the final inspection, the moment the builder sees his work finally put to use. The scariest part isn't his cold, empty eyes, it's the way he looks at you with a sense of professional pride. To him, you aren't a person with a story or a family. You are the occupant. You are the final piece of material that makes the room complete. He'll walk behind you, his boots making a dull, hollow thud on the stone, and you'll hear the faint clink of his tools. He might reach out and touch a wall, whispering a command in that word of unmaking, and you'll see the stone ripple like water as it adjusts to your presence. And once he's satisfied, once he sees that you've realized there is no exit, that the geometry has truly broken your spirit, and that your heart rate is providing a steady pulse for the engine of agony, he'll simply nod to himself. He'll roll up his blueprints, tuck his compass into his belt, and turn his back on you. He doesn't say goodbye. He just walks back into the dark, already thinking about the next wing, the next floor, and the next soul. As the heavy iron doors slam shut behind him, you'll realize the ultimate horror. The architect didn't build hell to punish you. He built it because he's a master of his craft, and you just happen to be the perfect material to fill the space.